Welcome back to Towers Take on Facebook Live. I'm Chip Towers. I work for Dog Nation, and I'm happy to do so, covering the Bulldogs. And we're going to have a quick, kind of abbreviated Towers Take today. Got a lot going on, a lot trying to get to. So we're going to squeeze this in. As always, this is an interactive medium. The main reason I'm here is to answer your questions, and I'll be happy to do that. So hit me up with your questions, and I will do my best to answer them. Um, and a lot going on right now, considering it's late January. Normally, it's um, almost quite well. I shouldn't say that with the changing of the recruiting seasons. Usually, recruiting is hot and heavy right now, but based on the way recruiting is set up, this is certainly not the busy time of year. And Georgia's definitely doing some recruiting right now, but it's not like it used to be. I mean, 70-80% of your class is done, so the new national signing day is in December, and this is what the residual, much like the basketball model, the spring period is usually pretty quiet. Hello, everybody. A lot of people on here. I appreciate you hanging out. I guess the latest news in the Dog Nation, as it were, is Matthew Downing, the freshman quarterback, transferring to TCU. I don't see this as a major development. Matthew Downing, certainly the best of the walk-ons that Georgia had last year on the roster, appeared in more games than appeared in 4 games. So technically, he's still got a red shirt. So he's a red shirt freshman, transferred out after the Sugar Bowl, and is now at TCU. I actually don't know. Let me see if anybody knows here. CT scan. I like that, John McMillan. We'll call it CT scan. Based on my CT scan, I don't know that whether Matthew Downing is on scholarship out there at TCU. If any of you guys have seen that somewhere, let me know. I don't think he is, and I don't know the ins and outs necessarily of his transfer. Happens all the time. But I actually think, it's my opinion that Stetson Bennett coming back to Georgia is fairly big deal. Stetson Bennett the fourth, I guess, is what he actually is. He is a legacy dog. Um, excuse me. Stetson Bennett drew rave reviews from Georgia's defensive players and former defensive coordinator Mel Tucker for his preparation with the Bulldogs for the Rose Bowl. Now, it's not like Georgia went out there and shut down Baker Mayfield in the Rose Bowl, but they were all talking about after that what a tremendous player he was. I'd say before the Rose Bowl, we didn't know all that much about who Stetson Bennett was. My first inclination or any knowing anything about Stetson Bennett was back when he was being considered as a preferred walk-on in 2000, prior to the 2017 season. I remember my old friend John DuPont. You guys may have known him from his 960 The Ref days. South Georgia guy down there from Stetson Bennett is from, saying, "Hey, this guy's really, really good and has some scholarship offers, but is thinking of coming to Georgia as a walk-on." He did. He impressed everybody, including Kirby Smart, who really worked hard to try to come up with a scholarship offer for Stetson, and I think he might have right there at the end. Stetson transferred to Jones County Community College, I think it is, in Mississippi, and did a really good job. Now, you can debate about what his year at junior college means to his ability, but I think the most important thing about Stetson Bennett is he already has a strong familiarity with Georgia's system. And I think, as we look at photos of Jake Fromm there, I think, in 2019, should something happen to Jake Fromm, Stetson Bennett's probably going to be your first guy in. Now, I know that Georgia also has signed Dwan Mathis out of Michigan, Detroit area in this class, but I think just like Justin Fields, I think it would be hard to expect Dwan Mathis to be ready to come in and really fill in for Jake Fromm in a serious situation if Fromm were to be out for an extended period of time. I think Stetson Bennett would have to be your go-to guy, and I think that's why he ended up coming back to Georgia in the long run. Um, that's what I would expect, and I think that's what makes Stetson Bennett a really important player. He had a great season at Jones. His stats don't blow you away, but junior college stats by and large are very deceiving, hard to go by, hard to tell a lot about it. Stetson Bennett is not a traditional quarterback in many senses. I mean, he's 5'10", 5'11". He's very quick, but don't go to sleep on his arm. That's what Mel Tucker and Lorenzo Carter and Davin Bellamy and all those guys were talking about when he was preparing him for the Super Bowls. They said that guy's got an arm and he knows what he's doing. He's smart with offenses. So I think Stetson Bennett was a big deal to get back for Georgia. And Georgia has other guys. I guess it's is it John Cedar or Setter that's still here as a walk on. I don't know if there's any others. I'm trying to look at a Georgia roster. Um, certainly Matthew Downing was the best of that, and there's no telling who else that Kirby is bringing here as an invited walk on. But I think Stetson Bennett is probably a bigger deal that Georgia got him in this 2019 recruiting class than a lot of people might suspect. What else? Is it the Georgia basketball game Tuesday night? They hung for a half with Kentucky. It's just so obvious with Ashton Hagens doing what he did for Kentucky. What he would have meant to Georgia had he been in a Georgia uniform Tuesday night. That was an interesting game for sure. And Georgia's got a long way to be able to play with the Kentuckys of the world, and they're going to have to improve dramatically in the backcourt to be able to do that. They're working on that. Anthony Ant-Man Edwards is the name that I'm hearing and reading about with regard to Georgia. Tom Crean desperately trying to get out there and find Georgia some guards, some point guards in particular. Anthony Edwards is a 6'5" guy, goes to a small private school in Atlanta. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it right now. I want to say Holy Innocents, but that's not what it is. It's a small church school. But he's a big time AAU player, number one player in the country, depending on who rankings you're looking at, and could probably help a great deal. Joey Waddell wants to know, can anybody tell me whatever happened to Amir Speed? Nothing happens with these guys. They're just either able to compete or not able to compete. And Speed went from a guy that you thought was going to figure into things to somebody who didn't there toward the end of it. We'll see how the defensive back situation plays out going forward. But I think Georgia's things on the defensive side of the ball for the Bulldogs are very, very promising next year. I actually think Georgia's defense, even though they've had a significant amount of turnover in the past couple of years, I think there's a lot of young talent on the defensive side of the ball. Now, they need to get them a coordinator, right? Surprised I'm not seeing more questions on that. The defensive coordinator situation at Georgia, I think, is fairly simple. I mean, I think Georgia is discussing their defensive backfield position with a number of candidates. What is not is clear, but I think what is holding things up is whether it will require any kind of title, co-coordinator title, to get the best suited defensive back that Kirby Smart identifies here. Whether that's Derek Ansley, whether that's Corey Raymond at LSU, or anybody else that Georgia might have talked to. Bakari Rambo is a graduate assistant. Has been helping out those defensive backs in bowl practice, and prior to them, um, all of that is probably under consideration. But I think it's probably similar to the offensive coordinator situation in that, in the same way that James Coley was always going to be a part of Georgia's offensive coordinator or offensive brain trust. I think the same could be said of Dan Lanning. And the reason is because Dan Lanning had an opportunity to join Mel Tucker at Colorado as defensive coordinator or co-coordinator of some sort. And Kirby, just like he didn't want James Coley to leave to go to Texas A&M, did not want to lose Lanning to Colorado, and so therefore he's probably made some promises to Dan Lanning that he needs to keep. The question is whether he would be a solo coordinator, share that title with Glenn Schumann, or share that title with somebody else. Now, look, I agree with pretty much anybody who says that your de facto defensive coordinator is right there in the video that Connor Riley is showing you right now, Kirby Smart. So it's for that reason that I just completely dismiss anything I hear anything about like John Chavis or any of the Dave Aranda, any of the coordinators who would be coming in here bringing their own system. That's not what's going to happen here. I think you got a relatively small and shallow pool of candidates that have experience with the Kirby Smart system, the Alabama system, the Georgia system, and that's what's holding things up until Kirby gets through the process and decides what way he wants to go. And unless this is going to be a Boffo hire, I don't think you're going to hear about it until after National Signing Day. I'm not certain about that, but that's certainly what I expect. I am not seeing your new comments right now, so let me try to refresh this and see if we can get you coming through, because that's not happening right now. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. We're waiting on a defensive coordinator. I don't think there's any look. Let me just speak directly to the Georgia fan. I don't think there's a reason to be panicked or concerned about the length of time the defensive coordinator situation is happening. I think it's rational on Kirby Smart's part. He's going to be deliberate about this decision. There's a lot of interest. Look, way over and beyond all the names that we throw out there. There's a lot of very qualified individuals who have sent Kirby Smart their information, and Georgia has to process all that. I think you have to interview 3 people for the position anyway. We know that Corey Raymond has. We know that Dan Lanning has. Certainly, I would imagine Glenn Schumann has, and then there's no telling what others might have behind the scenes. So I would imagine we'll find that out pretty soon. It's not like this is holding up your recruiting like it used to be when everybody signed on National Signing Day. There may be a little bit more urgency if that were still the case, but that's not what the case is anymore. So, so I would imagine that's what we're looking at on that. Meanwhile, we'll keep an eye on recruiting and to see what other quarterbacks may be coming in as preferred walk-ons or invited walk-ons, whatever you want to call them. I would imagine there'll be some developments on that. In fact, I'll be sure and ask Jeff about it, what he's hearing on that front, and report that. Meanwhile, I think Georgia's right where I thought they were going to be in 2019 anyway. Despite these latest developments, I think Georgia is still going to be a player in 2019 on a national scene, and depending on how the rest of the conference develops, I don't think Alabama's going to suddenly disappear. I think a lot of teams got better in the league. I think Florida got better. It's interesting looking at the national polls and stuff. I don't think Florida should have finished ahead of Georgia in any poll based on what I saw in that head-to-head game and Yeah, they improved some afterward, but not to the degree that I think they should have been ranked ahead of Georgia. Doesn't matter at the end of the day, and Georgia didn't, do anything to help itself by their um, performance in the Sugar Bowl. So that is what it is. But going into 2019, Georgia will be and should be favored in the uh, Eastern Division, and I'm sure it'll probably be Alabama that they're looking at across the sideline again. And both of these teams are going through considerable transition and change. And but I think Georgia so far has addressed its changes well. At the end of the day, you didn't want to lose Justin Fields to Ohio State, but I think they made a good move in getting Dwan Mathis to come and to tutor under Jake Fromm and Stetson Bennett to show up and to come in and give Georgia a safety net in the meantime. And I think he's a considerable one. I think Georgia's offensive line being back is going to help them. I think, so we're going to have to see some people develop at receiver. And I think there's plenty of candidates to do that. And then meanwhile, on the defensive side of the ball, I think Georgia's going to be better in 2019. So all of that is positive for Georgia. And Georgia basketball, we're going to have to wait a little while. Tom Crean's going to have to get a few more pieces in before that works for him. Meanwhile, the baseball team is busy getting ready on the diamond now. They'll be starting to play games in February. And I've seen them top 10 rankings, ninth, 10th. And it's a big year for Scott Strickland and the Diamond Dogs baseball team. So yeah, a lot to be excited about with Georgia. I think quarterback situation is fine with the Bulldogs. I think there's going to be a united front based on the developments with Justin Fields. I think everybody's going to get behind Jake Fromm now, and well, they should. And I think Stetson Bennett makes a nice um, safety net for all that. Apologize for kind of the abbreviated show. Got a lot going on today, and but we'll be back here next week, same time, same place, for Towers Take on Facebook Live. In the meantime, send me your questions. I'll go back and review your questions after this video post, and I will. You can always email me as well. So be sure to reach out on all the different platforms and let me know what you're thinking, and let me know what you think we ought to be writing about right now. So for everybody back in the studio in Atlanta, I'm gonna wrap it up here. This is Chip Towers with Dog Nation on Facebook Live, Towers Take on Facebook Live. Catch you here at the same time next week. See y'all.